Thinking about taking the Texas bar exam in 2020, that's a really bad idea. Stick around and I'll tell you what I think makes a lot more sense. Hi, I'm Jackson Mummy, the owner and founder of Celebration Bar Review, and for almost 30 years I've been teaching Texas bar exam. We've seen a lot of changes over those past 3 decades, but one of the biggest changes in all of that time is coming up in 2021. Texas is switching from their state-specific exam to the uniform bar exam beginning February 2021. And in this video, I want to just tell you a little bit about what that change means, and more importantly, the strategy that you can employ in order to be ready for that and to take or pass or maybe even skip the exam altogether. Well, let's jump right into what's going on. In October of 2018, the Texas Supreme Court adopted the recommendation of the task force on the bar exam to switch from the state-specific 2.5-day Texas bar exam, as it's presently being given, to something called the uniform bar exam. This is a test given now in more than 30 jurisdictions across the country, including New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Massachusetts, the District of Columbia, Colorado, New Mexico, a whole lot of places. It's a non-state specific 2-day exam covering the 7 multi-state bar exam subjects on Wednesday in the MBE, and then 6 essays on Tuesday and 2 multi-state performance tests. Now, the essays are given in non-state specific forms, and they can be taken from the multi-state bar subjects or another 7 additional topics, things like family law, secured transactions, wills and trusts, and so on. So it's a very different kind of exam. But one of the important things to understand is that it's written by the National Conference of Bar Examiners, not by the Texas Bar Examiners. And therefore, it is a non-state specific exam, but it is graded locally. And that's important to understand. But the real value of the UBE, as it's called, is not only the fact that it's non-state specific, it's that you can transfer scores from one UBE jurisdiction to another without having to retake the exam. So the portability of your score becomes something very, very different. Now, as we say, in February 2021, Texas is switching over to the exam, and that creates some interesting circumstances. The first thing that we want to be aware of is what kind of a score will it take to pass, and that has not been firmly decided yet. However, on the Texas Bar Examiner's website, they're indicating what we would expect, and that is that a UBE score of 270 out of a 400-point total, so 200 points for the multi-state bar exam, and then 200 points for the written part of the exam, so a passing score of 270, would be equivalent to the current 675 points that Texas requires. And so 270 is likely to be the score that's approved by the court. Now, how does that 270 compare? Well, if you were sitting for the New York or the DC or the New Jersey exam in the UBE, 266 is a passing score. If you were to receive a 260, that's passing in Alabama and in New Mexico and several other states. So we start at 260 as the lowest passing UBE jurisdiction, and we actually go up into the upper 270s for some jurisdictions. So Texas will be near the top of that range. However, that means it doesn't appear that it's going to be graded more difficult or a higher threshold that you would need. And by the way, if you're trying to compare this, let's say, to California, if we put California on the UBE scale, you'd need a 288. So 270 sounds pretty good in comparison. In any event, that's the score that we anticipate is going to be required. Now we get to the strategy part just a bit more, because knowing that there's going to be the UBE, the question is, when will Texas begin accepting those UBE scores that you have? Now, they haven't made any exact rules yet, but most likely, according to the bar examiners, they'll begin accepting transfers of scores no later than July 1st of 2020. In other words, it looks like at least by that date, they'll begin to accept transfers. And they propose that they actually accept applications to transfer UBE scores beginning December 1st, 2019. Now, the significance of that December 1st, 2019 means that it looks like scores that you got in July of 2019 on the bar exam might be transferable. So from the July 2019 exam through the 2020 exams, it appears that you could take the UBE someplace other than Texas, and if you got whatever turns out to be the passing score in Texas, 270 presumably, you could waive into Texas without sitting for the exam itself. So that's the way it looks at this point. Now, that leads to another question, and that is whether or not Texas would accept a UBE score that's earned more than 2 years before the date of the exam. We use 2 years as a marker because most jurisdictions in the UBE say any score you've received is good for 2 years. Again, the Texas Supreme Court has not ruled definitively on this, but we're told that they will most likely accept UBE scores earned within 2 years prior to the date of application for the Texas bar, regardless of your practice experience. So if you get a passing score in the UBE 2 years before you want to waive into Texas, it'll be a good score. Now, if you earned your UBE score more than 2 years ago, so anywhere from 2 years to 5 years ago, you may be eligible for admission if you have 2 years of practice experience. That's really interesting. So if you took the UBE more than say a year ago, and it's a passing score when Texas announces their UBE score, and you've been in practice for 2 years, you'll be able to waive into Texas. This is something really new, and it's really exciting for many of you who've already got acceptable UBE scores. So if you took the UBE a couple of years ago, go back and check those scores. If it's 270 or better, you may be able to waive into Texas if you've been in practice for at least 2 years. But that UBE testing date only goes back 5 years to the date of your application. So you want to make sure that you're watching those deadlines. Now, the final piece of this is that Texas appears to be doing what New York and a couple of other jurisdictions are doing already, and that is you take the UBE, which is non-state specific, and then once you've passed the UBE, it appears that there will be a requirement that you take an online course on Texas law and then answer an online open book multiple choice exam, kind of like those driver's ed tests that you take after you've gotten a speeding ticket. Not that I would know anything about that. But the idea is that it's really a pro forma piece. They've been doing this in New York for a couple of years now. I'm not aware of anyone that's ever failed that exam. I think the same thing would be true here in Texas. All right, well, those are the rules. What's the strategy? In my view, the strategy is this. If you do not have to sit for the Texas exam specifically in 2020, I would not do so. I would go ahead and sit for the UBE in any jurisdiction that you want. It does not matter where you actually take the exam. So find a convenient jurisdiction, find one that's got a reasonable location for you and reasonable character and fitness and background checks and application fees, and sit for that exam. Get your score. Aim for a 270 if you really want to get into Texas. Then when Texas announces their rules, it's likely that your 270 taken during 2020 will be acceptable, and you can waive into Texas as well as a number of other states. The worst thing that happens is that you get a score of 260 or higher, and you're eligible to be barred in any number of jurisdictions. So I don't think there's much of a downside. But let's say that you take the UBE in 2020 and you don't get 260 or better. Well, I think the good news here is that you would not have passed the Texas bar. It would have required a 270. But what you've got is experience with the UBE. You've got some practice on it and a sense of what the test is about. And I think that's the real key here. So it's a real opportunity for you to get ready for the test, learn how to do it. Now, why am I saying don't take the Texas exam in 2020? The reason is that most of the people that will be sitting for that exam will be Texas law school grads, 3Ls, who have to sit because they're going to practice right away. That is the highest passing group on the exam. It's the cohort or the demographic that will do the best, and it means the stiffest competition. So for most of you, unless you're a 3L coming out of the University of Texas or some Texas law school, if you've got any alternative other than practicing in Texas in 2020, take that alternative. The Texas bar pass rate is not a good one. The exam typically is very difficult. It's one of the longest tests in the country at 2.5 days. And of course, it's very state specific with things like, as you see behind me, oil and gas. All of those things go away in the new UBE. So it's a better test, an easier test. I think it's going to be more fairly graded in many respects. Texas has been unique in having their bar examiners actually do some of the grading, and it's pretty idiosyncratic right now. So I think you're going to get away from that and get to a more consistent, uniform style of grading as well. Now, if you'd like to know more about any of these strategies and how we can help you prepare for the UBE or the Texas bar exam, we're certainly still going to be helping people sitting for that exam up until the end of the Texas exam, specifically in 2020. Um, Please reach out and contact us. There's a link here where you can get more information or schedule a consultation with me to talk about your studies. This is a strategy that can make a huge difference, and we encourage you to jump on it, get going now, get everything ready, and be fully prepared when Texas switches over in February 2021.